Not every debt is good for you. Not every debt is good for you. If there's a question I've been receiving many times is a question from people who are saying that they do not understand how they found themselves in financial trouble when they were trying to do something that looked like something very nice. I have a long list of people who've gotten themselves into financial trouble because they were borrowing money, probably to clear some property acquisition balance. They were borrowing money probably to invest in a certain venture. They were borrowing money to put in a place that looks like a very good place, right? And when I listen to their stories, I begin to see one of the things I speak about quite a lot. And that is when I remind you that not every debt is good for you. Remember, we have to agree from the onset that it is not a must that you will utilize debt for everything that you have. I know people will tell you left, right, and center that you cannot survive without debt, and every person needs to have debt. Even the country has debt, even the world has debt, and things like those ones. But the truth is that debt is not for everyone. Debt is only for those who understand how to utilize debt for their benefit, those who understand how debt works. When I wrote my book, Debt is Good Only If You Master It, I used to laugh because there are people who go into a borrowing spree and they say, that guy said debt is good. Many times I remind you that when you start burning your fingers, I will not be there to help you when the fingers will be burning. But here's the thing. It is possible that you might be having a very good reason, a very valid reason in the eyes of the world and even in your own eyes, all right? Because every time you'll hear people talk about good debt and bad debt, good debt and bad debt. And one blunder that many people have done is that they have painted a picture of something that looks to the effect that if you borrow for a good reason, then that debt is good debt. But many times I will come to also awaken you and remind you that it is possible for you to borrow for a good cause, but that debt ends up being a bad debt because you didn't know how to go about it. You did not know how to borrow, so to speak, all right? Because borrowing is a skill that we must learn if we need to use debt for our benefit. So it is possible you might be borrowing because you want to complete payment for land purchase. Land purchase looks like a very brilliant reason in the eyes of very many people, but it is also possible that that decision might be your starting point in the world of financial struggle. I've sat down with very many people whose first encounter into the world of debt was when they wanted to complete certain payments for certain projects, for certain investments that looked like very good investments, but because they blundered, all right? Part of the skill of borrowing is your ability to be able to match the type of debt, the type of credit facility you're looking for, and the nature of your need. Right? And that's why I reiterate again that not every debt is good for you, because every kind of need has got a specific type of credit that answers to it. Any kind of mismatch begins to bring a lot of trouble. Right? For example, debt that is classified as short-term debt was created for emergencies. Emergencies. And emergencies, I've said many times, are things that were unforeseen. All right, so something has happened overnight, and probably its budget is bigger than you had planned, its budget is bigger than you had tried to save for it, or probably it just happened and you had never anticipated it and you had never done anything to prepare yourself for it. All right, and someone has gotten ill, someone has gotten an accident and things like those that probably you were not prepared for. Now, if you're looking for money, probably for medication of those people, and you start going to look for a loan that is secured using a title deed, you might want to realize that by the time the lender is done with perfection of securities, a process that might take as long as a month or even beyond, we doubt whether the person whose life you want to save will still be waiting for you in hospital, assuming the doctors had told you that they needed some deposit for them to start working on your patient. Now, sometimes some people do not have money to buy food for their families, and that begins to put them in an awkward situation. All right, and you realize that probably you need to borrow some money. Of course, that is not part of the reasons we would call debt good debt. But if you find yourself in that situation, and that is the time you walk into a bank with a pay slip, yet the only need you had was need for a packet of flour, a packet of unga, right, that would cost you probably 100 and something shillings, or let's just say 500 shillings for purposes of this example. And then you walk into a bank with your payslip and you want to borrow a loan that is to be serviced through the payslip to answer to a need that ordinarily would have been answered probably by making a call to a friend to sort you out, so that then you will square things out when you get some money. So you have to learn how to match between the kind of need that you have and the kind of credit that agrees to that particular need. When I train about what I call purpose-driven borrowing, I get into the details of showing you the need for this and how you need to be able to match different needs and different categories of credit. If you're looking for debt for a reason that is heavy, that is capital intensive, that is long-term in nature, you also go to look for credit that is long-term in nature. All right, and I have seen people who had very good reasons, like I mentioned, and they went to borrow money from Shylocks. Right, so someone was buying a piece of land and they have a small balance remaining, but because of the pressure to clear the balance, because of the pressure to be through with the payments, they find themselves going to borrow from Shylocks. All right, and so you're now borrowing debt that is expensive. You are accessing credit that is expensive. You are accessing funds that stand a chance to push you into a lot of trouble, because those guys are expensive. Those kinds of facilities are expensive. 10%, 20%, 30%, or even 100% per month, per week, and things like those ones. Right, so whereas the reason looks like a very good reason, where it will land you at the end of the day is a place you don't want to imagine. All right, I've seen people who today would be wallowing in the trap of debt, not because they were reckless in the way they managed money, but because they blundered at the point of borrowing to execute something that looked like a very good reason for borrowing. You need to be cautious, right? You need to be cautious. Now, many times, even as we teach you about how to manage debt, we will suggest things like consolidation. And consolidation is where we will suggest to you that if you are owing very many people different amounts of money, every person you owe, I have said, is a pressure point, right? So if you owe very many people, then you have very many pressure points. When each of these people call to push for their money, you stand a high chance of losing yourself, because the pressures are coming from multiple points, right? And therefore, consolidation becomes a way of you being able to acquire funds from one source that comes to swallow several sources, right? And that begins to ease up a few things for you. That begins to reduce the number of pressure points for you. Now, here is the challenge. Many people, having heard about consolidation, will dash into it without considering some basics of consolidation. For example, if you have to consolidate, you must look for the cheapest option. You must look for the fairest option. Fair in terms of pressure, fair in terms of terms and conditions, and the source has to be the cheapest, because you cannot go for an expensive source to swallow debts that were cheap. In that particular case, then you will be jumping from a safer place to a hotter place. All right, the classical case of jumping from the frying pan into the fire. We have those instances where the intention is good, to consolidate, to help you ease pressure, to help you be able to even reduce the amount you spend on debt, because that's what consolidation will also help you. Because if you're owing 5 people and you've been paying different amounts to all of them, and you've paid for a while, chances are high that the balances have come down. So today, if you're to look for money from one source that is equivalent to what can clear the outstanding balances, that the total outstanding balance will be less than the total balance at the point of borrowing from all these other sources. That means the repayment amount for this resultant debt, for this new debt that you're taking to consolidate, will be lower than what you've been paying consolidated to all these other people, and that leaves you with some extra amount of money. All right, so we have people who have, with this very good reason, gone to borrow from Shylocks and borrowed huge amounts of money. I've met people who borrowed from Shylocks $1 million bob, 2 million shillings to go and consolidate. And I look at it and I would have wanted to smile, to laugh, but I cannot, because it is a very dangerous position. Because if someone is charging you 10% per month and they've given you 1 million, that means at the end of every month you pay them 100,000. All right, and formal lenders like banks, for example, will be charging you 13% per annum, 14% per annum. So why would you pay someone 120% when there's another source that can give you at 13% or 14% per annum? Because when people are taking money from these expensive sources, they rarely think about the bigger picture. And something convinces them that in a very short span of time, some miracle will have happened and they will have gotten some money for them to be able to clear that particular debt before maturity, only for them to realize that things refuse often to work the way they wanted. Another classical example would be someone who is in the process of constructing a house, right? Someone is constructing a house and the house is still very far from completion, and this person goes to pick a salary advance so that they can buy 1 bag of cement or 2 bags of cement to push the house from where it is to the next level. That looks like a very good reason, but the kind of credit you're going for, the kind of borrowing you're going for is not meant for that kind of thing, because salary advance is a short-term thing, so it was meant for emergencies. Right? Construction of your house is not an emergency. So the danger comes in where you have borrowed and bought a few bags of cement and pushed the house from where it was to another level. But the house is not even ready for your occupation. 30 days after you borrowed, the lender wants their money plus interest. All right? So from your regular income, you have to pay off that debt plus interest. Many times you will discover that the remaining amount may not be enough to carry you from end month or payday to the next payday. And that might be the beginning of your perennial borrowing, your frequent borrowing from short-term lenders, just because you mismatched between type of credit and the kind of need. Right? Things like your house are things that will require you to go for credit that is long-term in nature. I would understand if your house has gotten to a point where probably you're only remaining with window panes and you don't want to continue paying rent, and therefore if you took a salary advance to buy window panes so that you can move into the house immediately, then that makes a lot of sense, because the money you've been paying rent wherever you've been living can even be used to clear the salary advance, and you have moved into your house and probably you feel nice about it. But when the house is still very far, it might sound very beautiful in the eyes of the average person that you took a salary advance to buy 2 bags of cement or so to push the house to another level. But the truth is, you're playing with fire. It is highly likely that you can actually burn your fingers for that particular action. I don't know how best to overemphasize this or even emphasize this, but the truth is, if you must use debt, you must learn how debt works before you get to swim yourself deeper into it, because you might easily find yourself burning your fingers with very good intentions, very, very good intentions. So be careful while you go about borrowing. Make sure you borrow only when you need to, not just because you qualify, like I've said before. But beyond that, make sure you are able to match the kind of need you have with the kind of credit that is fit for that kind of need. Look, you can do better.